Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. We are back once again for another edition of the E29 Baseball and Softball Journeys podcast. Today, I want to thank all of my sponsors one more time. We actually drank the Chihuahua Cerveza with my last guest, so we don't have it for this one. But I also want to thank 100% Media that does all of our editing and video production. I also want to thank Adam Schwartz for providing the office space and our studio for us. Today, I am very fortunate because we've been trying to connect and reconnect and get this podcast set up, and today was the day. I am going to welcome the multi-talented Miss Syeda Jafri, who wears many hats, and I am going to ask her questions about all of those, and we have already scheduled a part 2. So I want to start part 1 by welcoming you to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ernie.
Now, again, I got to tell you, I'm a little intimidated because you spend more time behind the mic than I have.
No, it's easy.
Well, I'm hoping so. And I have questions for you, but I want to keep you on some kind of a level because we already planned a part 2, and my ADD is already kicking in. And so I'm already thinking about part 2, and I don't want to use up all my good questions. So normally on our little show here, what I do is I kind of ask everybody to tell us about their journey and how they got where they are. Mm-hmm. But being that this is kind of a unique experience, you know, we talked a lot before we got on camera. Mm-hmm. You have many hats.
Right.
One of them, you are the spokesperson for the Rialto Unified School District.
Yeah, the agent of communication media services.
Okay, sorry I missed that.
No, that's fine. It's a very long title.
Maybe might be bigger. It's harder to put on a T-shirt. But that's one of the titles. You are also the morning radio DJ for KCAL FM right here in Redlands, 96.7. Weekends. If anybody's up at 6:30 on a Saturday morning, you can hear. I usually catch the tail end of it, the 9.
You get the 9 to 10.
The 9 to 10 part, yeah. So that's one of the hats. You have also done some time on television.
Yes.
Which is something else. Now, what station was that with again?
Actually, that was PBS. I did PBS at KCAL for about a decade.
Okay. So going into our normal process here, when I ask you about your journey, I will go ahead and start this one. I will say we came together and we met way back on the baseball field of Eisenhower High School. Miss
Go Ike.
Go Ike, yeah, exactly. We've had Angel Arache in here from Eisenhower. Mm-hmm. We've had Nick Theodoro in here from Eisenhower, and now you are our third alumni. But that's how we met. We met through baseball. You were also a journalist for the Rialto Record. Don't know what the circulation is on that anymore.
It's
but
really good.
Is it?
Strong.
Well, there you go. So we can say that is a large newspaper. Mm-hmm. And so that's how we met. And so we met through baseball, through sports. And then you were also involved in sports prior to the other Rialto Unified and KCAL. What was that?
Oh, well, I was a sports reporter, actually. And so I did a lot of freelance writing. Okay. And when I came back, I grew up in Rialto. I was born in Pakistan. And my father, who's a retired magistrate, decided to take the entire family with a younger brother and an older sister. We moved to Rock Springs, Wyoming. Wow. I know, which is not the end of the world, but you could probably see it from there. And so, no, I loved Wyoming. And then we moved to Rialto. Hawthorne first, got the apartment. There were a young couple, young kids, and we moved to Rialto, and I went through the elementary, the middle school, and the high school years in Rialto Unified School District, which is my heart, as is many, many students. And so when I went into the journalism program, started writing for the Rialto Record, freelancing became, working your way up, earning your stripes, and then eventually doing feature stories and then doing sports stories when sports reporters would become sick, and it was interesting because when you enter a sports arena in the mid 1990s, there were a lot of women who were not doing sports, and I'm not going to be I'll be the first one to say volleyball was the sports I played, so it wasn't as if I was gung-ho and passionate, but it was thrown to me, hey, can you do this? And I learned the trades. And at that time, Paul Oberjugi from the San Bernardino Sun was there, also John Murphy, Jeff Arnold from the LA Times. So I was very fortunate to have some really cool guys who would kind of help me out. And then I realized sometimes the coaches would want to talk to me before they'd want to talk to the guys. And I was very happy to turn on my charm to get my quotes. And we spoke, and we had some really good it was a good bonding experience too, to get to know some of the coaches and how hard they work. And, teachers, coaches, they were always my heroes anyway. So it wasn't a very difficult job. Then I started enjoying it, started writing, then moved on up to the town editor for Rialto Record. And I know we had met when you were coaching.
Right.
And by the way, you were one heck of a coach.
Oh, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm so good it got me behind the mic.
Hey, no.
It got me off the field. Yep. So I'm curious, and I'm still stuck on the first one again, my brain, the way that works.
Uh-huh.
How did you get to Wyoming?
Well, my father actually, my uncle lived in Laramie, Wyoming.
Okay.
He was a professor,
okay.
Taught mathematics. All my father's brothers were either doctors or professors. And so my father was the only one who was a judge. And then he had, everybody was in America,
sure,
but him. And so they are like, come on over, younger brother, land of opportunity. And I think it was like 1974 or 5. And then my brother was born. Sweetwater County, Rock Springs, Wyoming, yes. And by the way, Wyoming is the equal rights state. So I think it was good for me to be going there first. So we were there in Wyoming for a couple of years. And then, of course, my mother's sister was in California. And at that time, living in the Hawthorne area, and then moved to Anaheim Hills. And then she told her sister, come on over to California. There's more life here. So that's, where we wound up in California.
Sure.
Because...
Okay, that fills in a lot of blanks there, because from A to B to C, there's
absolutely.
a lot of, that kind of looked like that spin the globe. and
Exactly, yeah. And so my dad was in a private insurance company, raised us three and educated us and did the best. And then we went into our life experiences. My sister ended up being a physician, a very excellent specialist in the Orange County area. My brother working for the environmental agency, so he's an engineer. And I was supposed to be the attorney in the family. He said, hey, be a lawyer and a judge like me. And I'm like, heck no. It just wasn't in me. There's a lot of hard work to be a lawyer.
Sure.
And I always enjoyed broadcast journalism. I always enjoyed broadcasting, radio. I was very enamored with music at an early age. When my father was probably my first teacher, making me listen to like country songs from Lynn Anderson and remember, we're in Wyoming first.
Sure, the original country.
Exactly. And so Merle Haggard, and I would, the AM stations I would listen to. And then I just became a rocker. And when I did, had one of the coolest experiences with my father, because one day we were in the car and I was listening to Ozzy Osbourne. And a lot of people are thinking, oh my gosh, this quiet little nice Pakistani American girl in the car with her father. And my dad told me, well, if you're going to listen to Ozzy Osbourne, you have to turn it up. And that's when I knew that, my father's giving me his blessings to get out of law and get into my own field of choice. And so the passion really came from that.
That was actually going to be one of my questions, because I know in some cultures you would be the slacker. Because you weren't a physician,
he never said that. Well, you have to understand that my grandparents, my father's mother was one of the first Muslim doctors in British India, and so she was a surgeon, and so my and his father was a doctor. So the conventional way out was being, get the job, get the degree, and get your feet planted and do your. And I was his. I guess he would say that I took the scenic route to adulthood, because I wanted to try everything. I wanted to do a little of everything. And he said, there's so much energy in you at that time. He said, go ahead and go for it. And so he was very supportive, and he kind of walked through me with all of that. We lost him about 4 years ago. But yes, but at the same time, my mother was very supportive as well. She was a homemaker and did odd jobs, to take care of us in Rialto. But my mother always instilled in us that the education I didn't get, the experiences I didn't get, I want my children to have.
Sure.
And so it's always a little unsettling for my mother when somebody tells her, we listened to I heard your daughter and she's playing KCAL. My mother smiles and says, I don't listen to that music much, but it's rock and roll, and she enjoys it and still doesn't quite get it. But she's never done anything but applauded my success. She's very supportive.
Yeah, that's good to hear, and it's interesting too, because when you'd mentioned Wyoming, I think back, my father was in construction, and so a lot of his coworkers were cowboys, actual cowboys, rodeo, and had cattle and ranches and things. And so the country that I grew up listening to, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Conway Twitty, and now I hear country, I'm like, this isn't the same country that I think when you
it's like rock and roll.
Yeah.
Music is always evolving. It's always changing.
Yeah. And I do miss some of those. I still listen when I can and nobody's around. I listen to the old country just because it reminds me of growing up, and then of course where we grew up, the diversity is something that I actually really enjoy looking back on now, because you got to find a little bit about different things and different people, and you learned about different cultures. And now more than ever, I look at that as a blessing.
Right.
Where we were, there was just so much diversity and so many different backgrounds. I love looking back at that. So like you had mentioned before, that's always going to be home to me, and I love that grounding part of it. But for you, looking at all of the different things as we were talking before, it's always fascinated me that you've got all of the different irons that you have going, and you always seem to fall in control and on top on all of them. And so to me, that journey from knowing
you
is fascinating.
So I'm fooling you too.
Well, maybe, but you're doing a good job of it. I mean, like I said, it's really, really interesting for me, because you had mentioned before, but I look at it and I think of all of the different things that I've seen you do. You've done very well.
Thank you.
And you've been successful at them. And
I appreciate that.
No, it's honest, like I said. So one of the things that I wanted to have you come on for was to just kind of let people know how you were able to do the things you do. And so we can start with the school district. That's one of the things that, for me, working at a school district, my wife being a teacher, and coaching, some of the coaches I've had on, we've talked more about being a teacher rather than a coach, because you're using coaching in baseball as your avenue to build young people, to promote their wanting to succeed and trying to create that drive to succeed in whatever job through sports.
Right.
And so now, you being through education, you have a big part of that, and you're still in that teaching role.
Right. And thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I actually have always looked up as teachers as my heroes. I was very fortunate in the K-12 system in Rialto Unified School District that, you're lucky if you can just find that one teacher. I was fortunate because I had many. Yeah. There were many. And some of them are board presidents today. Some of them are directors now. Many of them have retired, but they've moved on. But they're very near and dear to my heart, because I know that everything that we do in public education is to take that child, develop the young mind, and let them go and let them discover who they are. And so when I did join the school district, which was in 2005, I came in as a public information officer. People didn't realize in the late 1990s that the school business is a business. It is there's dollars and cents and checks and balances, and it's all public funds. It's not our own playground to do whatever we want with the money.
Sure.
And so they realize that they do need to have marketing, and it's very important how you market. It's very important, sometimes damage control. You need somebody to give information to the masses the best that you can. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. I have a good team, a good support system, and we work very hard. And so in 2005, I had walked in with who was my former assistant principal at Eisenhower High School, Edna Herring. And Mrs. Herring, I served under her when she was a superintendent. And then when she had left, we had Dr. Harold Sebron, who came in. He was there for a good 5.5, 6 years. And then after that, we had an interim superintendent. And then after that, we had Dr. Guatemoc Avila, who is a dynamic superintendent for the Rialto Unified School District, the first Latino superintendent, and has made tremendous changes and growth. And so I was very fortunate that I was learning, mentoring through some of them. Maybe not all, but some of them, definitely. And then working with teachers, promoting, and through social media. I don't want to say we created that, because I'm not Al Gore. I didn't create the internet. But at the same time, under our, under the umbrella of what we were trying to accomplish in marketing, we went it forward, and we have Twitter now. We have Instagram. We have Facebook, which belongs to the, I always say it belongs to the staff. It belongs to the students in our district. And the most wonderful thing about this is we can now promote through the social media platforms and what we have in front of us, all the wonderful accomplishments that are happening in the school district. Yeah. And one of the things that we're starting as well is a podcast that Ricardo Carlos brought up to our department, and he is the multimedia manager for this district. And so we have good people who are trying to promote all the wonderful things. You're always going to have some negativity. You're always going to have things that are going to go wrong. You're always going to, because we don't have a utopia unified school district. Sure. And especially when the pandemic started in March 21st, students' lives were upside down, parents' lives were upside down, teachers' lives were upside down, classified support staff. Everybody just took a step back and said, what is this? What happened to us? But we have to heal. We have to move on. We have to get to a space and a place in our lives where we can continue, whether it's through distance learning, whether it's through a hybrid fashion. We've got to make sure that we're all together saying the same thing for the betterment of the child.
Sure.
And so being in the Rialto Unified School District as a product and as a student, I understand the students' needs. My mother being a parent and being a PTA leader, I understand what PTA goes through. Having teachers as my mentors and my role models, I understand what the teachers go through. So you have a good kind of a global understanding of the public education system, and I can't imagine working for any other district but Rialto. I truly do love the district and the employees. We have about 3,000 employees. We're the largest employer in the district. Wonderful staff members. Again, there's always going to be somebody after reading this or viewing this podcast might say, but this went wrong and this went wrong and that one. And that is what life is.
Sure.
You know, most of our life is we want to concentrate on the momentum, not the friction. But we have to grow and we have to understand if there's problems, we take it and we move forward, but we cannot be fatalists about it, especially in a time like this with the pandemic where much is not in our control. We have state, we have the county, we have things that are dictated by the feds. There's so many rules and regulations and guidelines that people are being just, you know, it's very self-absorbing. You just have to sit here and take it all in. What's best for my child? What's best for the student? What's best for our families? So it has been a educational experience for the past 15 years going through so much.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because that's one of the things that I've noticed talking to coaches and then talking to different players and different parents and things like that, and understanding that this is the first time for everyone. And now more than ever, everybody has to step back and understand this isn't just a Riverside, Rialto problem. This is not a Southern California problem. This is a global problem. And there are people in positions that are having to make decisions that are not going to please everyone.
No.
And I can't look at this internally. Everyone understands that this decision might create a problem for you, but be beneficial for this person or not for this. So we're going to have to come to some type of understanding where we can all try to make the best of it, move beyond it and go forward. And now we're coming to that time with education because the traditional start of the school year is right upon us. And there's still a lot of uncertainty, safety-wise, how we're going to deliver that education and things like that. And it's really, really difficult for a lot of people to look at things more on a global level rather than on a me level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
With the marketing department for schools, and that's something for me that I find interesting because I knew it, but a lot of people didn't know that the schools have a marketing. What are some of the benefits that having a marketing department for, let's just say, Rialto Unified has?
Well, I think one of the benefits is majority of your communications devices that you can utilize as tools, we can reach the masses. Again, do we reach everybody? Do we not? We have email systems. We have Peach Jar. We have so many different social media platforms. To inform and to keep people aware is so important, especially now during COVID, because you have children's lives at stake. You have, staff, not just teachers, not just coaches, not just principals, everyone. Everybody's life matters, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to look at that. You also have to inform parents on what's going on. And so they need to hear one voice, but they need to hear the correct information. It is an enormous, awesome responsibility. And I would love to say we're perfect at it, but we're learning. Right. We're growing as well. I mean, I take my hits when I have to. And so, you understand, okay, it wasn't done this way, right? Let's do it this way. Okay, let's do this way. Press releases when we have to. We have a fact sheet that we put on our social media. We try to text the parents the information. We are very, very keen on making sure strategically we keep our focus on school sites where the focus needs to be. It's almost saying it's wonderful when you make something but nobody knows about it.
Sure.
You need that exposure. And I think through our websites, through our, it's a business. And like any business, you need to know it's there. And so our branding, Bridging Futures Through Innovation, that is what Rialto Unified School District is about in the 21st century. So we have changed, we have evolved. I remember a time in the early 1900s, one of the requirements for a teacher in the Rialto Unified School District was you cannot be married. Can you imagine this? And it was mostly female teachers. And I thought, gosh, they were robbed.
Right.
They couldn't have kids
Wow.
because they were teaching your children. What a horrible thing. But you see what I'm saying about growth and marketing?
Sure.
And, there's so many things that we learn through marketing and through media. And one of them's branding. We really are at an awesome and a wonderful responsibility where this district has received over 36 either state, regional, local awards for teachers, for classified employees, for principals, administrators. Even our superintendent took AXA, Region 12 Administrator, the Superintendent of the Year, which, there's 33 superintendents in San Bernardino County. So you kind of have an idea of some great things that are happening and how we market it. But we're very careful. We don't market ourselves.
Sure.
We have to market what's important. What's important is the child.
Right.
It's the graduations. It's the students. It's the school site. So our superintendent and our Board of Education's vision is, the vision is very clear, and the mission, rather than the vision, the mission is very clear, and the mission is that we need to keep our focus on student success. And when you have happy teachers, when you work in harmony, the kids are happy.
Sure.
You have a teacher, your wife is a teacher, you understand that, you were a coach, you were a teacher. And so to us, just to accentuate that, to applaud that, to promote that, to champion that success is what we do in the district.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I actually, part of the reason that we started doing this for coaches was because I wanted to make them more relatable,
right,
and make them more personal, because for a high school student that might be looking at Playing Beyond, it's just a picture and a bio on a website. And sometimes I think with parents, you're letting these people guide your children and help your children grow. And the more you can know about them, or the more you become familiar with them,
right,
it changes your interaction with them.
Absolutely.
And it makes it easier for you to communicate with on a human level with them, rather than be frustrated with what you're not getting or what you feel you're not getting from the school district. And I think that just on a human level, it makes things a lot easier when you know the people you're dealing with, or you feel like you know. And now that social media is so prevalent, you feel like you know everyone.
Absolutely.
And you feel like you can relate to them. It is. And having that for the district, I think, is great, because parents like to see their kids happy. They like to see their kids interacting, doing things at school. They like to see the teachers doing things with them. It just gives them that sense of comfort that my school is doing what it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. And it's so trite and so cliche. And I feel like I'm just like a walking PR machine when I'm like, this is a wonderful district and we're all wonderful people and we all have group hugs, and there's things that go wrong. There's people who are unhappy. There are people, but we work through problems.
Sure.
And that's what we have to do. I mean, you cannot focus on the negativity, because that's what's going to eat you.
Right.
What you need to do is you need to focus on the positive things that the school district is doing, that our school sites are doing. And we do have some of the most wonderful teachers and wonderful school site staff. Yeah. And you have a support system in the district office. Our nutrition services department has been feeding students with grab-and-go meals, and they've reached over 1 million. And I understand other districts are doing it too, but they're doing it in a unique way.
Sure.
Where they're feeding families, and they're like, hey, we're still here for you.
Yeah.
We have departments in our in central office that go out of their way to help and assist when needed. You don't hear about that sometimes, because it's not, everything isn't about marketing. You don't do things for marketing. Our job is just to accentuate the good things that are happening in the public education system in Rialto Unified.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to do that as long as we're there.
Yeah. And it's great, because also it shows what you're doing that other districts may not have thought of. And so sometimes we'll see it and they'll, hey, they're doing it over here in Rialto. Why don't we try to put something together like this? Because there's so many different ideas out there that can be shared, but you just don't have time to have the conversation to share them.
And one of the wonderful things about getting as old as I am in this district is that I get to mentor some of our students, and some of our students have gone on to become communication PIOs, directors in other districts. I still keep in touch with them. I don't look at it as a competition. I think it's wonderful that our students can go somewhere else and I can guide them and I can help them and say, try this at your district, it's working for ours. Or help another board member who may be a friend of ours. Or PR and marketing it's not always a competition.
Sure.
Everything in life isn't a competition, and I'm saying this in front of a coach, so I feel kind of bad and a little like, what are you talking about? But to assist other people in making something look good, into accentuating something. When it's a positive press, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you guys might want to try it this way. Because I would be the last person. I don't want to sit here and say I know it all, because I don't. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. Yeah. And there was a time when people are afraid of Facebook. Oh my God. And now everybody's on it. People are still afraid of Facebook and on it. So, we're just taking the right tools to support students, to inform parents, and to be a support system for our staff, and trying to be one of the best school districts that we can be. But that doesn't take away from some other school districts. We want them to succeed as much as we are. Yeah.
Well, a couple things that you had mentioned in there. One, from a coaching standpoint, those people that you have mentored are part of your tree now, coaching tree, as your branch on some of your mentors' tree.
Yes.
And as a coach, they want you to have more branches on your tree.
Absolutely.
Because you're taking little pieces of me as the coach, and you're planting seeds elsewhere. And so, that's one of the satisfactory things. It's not a competition. It's more of a pleasure, because you're helping other people go farther than you ever dreamed. Your reach will go years beyond your time.
It's more important than a win-loss.
It is.
I don't get any satisfaction when I open up a newspaper, or the Sun newspaper, or the Rialto Record, or the Black Voice News, or when I open up a newspaper, El Chicano. I don't get happy when I see something horrible happening somewhere else.
Sure.
I look at it as a opportunity to find out how I would have done it differently. What could I have done to change things? And our newspapers are not our enemy. Our actions are our enemies. Sure. If you don't want to end I tell people this all the time, and it's not just in education. If you don't want to end up on the front page doing something wrong, don't do anything wrong. You won't end up on the front page doing something wrong, right? Sure. So it kind of works both ways. So I think newspapers, media, it's a reflection of who we are. And of course, they're changing as well, because newspapers have gone digital mostly. Most people are not opening up the newspapers anymore. I am, because I'm an old timer and I'm very old school in some things and very conservative. So I'll open up the paper just to get that feel. Yeah. But majority of the time, I could just go through my smartphone and look at things and know.
Well, and it's interesting. You also mentioned when people were afraid of Facebook, and you remember going back, the internet was going to connect the world, and that was a scary thing.
And then the Y2K was going to kill us all.
Exactly. But now you look at it and go, wow, hey, the internet can connect the world. So school districts in other states and other countries and other parts of the world can see what we're doing, and we can see what they're doing, and we can all learn and grow from that. And people can be on shows like this, and they can listen to people that are doing different things and go, wow, I can do the same things that she's doing.
Technology is fascinating, but it's also scary. It all depends on who's using it and what you're using it for.
Exactly, and how you're using it, yeah. So going back to that school district again, and you being involved in the school district, was there a point when you decided this is what I want to do? Because you could probably be a very good teacher, could probably be a professor somewhere.
That's nice.
But that passion for education and helping people can go into different directions. So,
well, I will tell you that with anybody's profession, whether it's teaching, whether it's law, whether it's a police officer, whether it is, a doctor, you step back and you think, is this for me? And you usually come to that determination when you are dealing with some trials and tribulations. You don't, when you're at the top of your game, you're not, I want to give it up. But you do analyze your life and you make the best decision for yourself. No decision should be based upon, a career move or wealth. I think you have to be happy as a person. You have to have some sort of nirvana in you and say, this is what I want to do. So I did come to that crossroad, and I don't want to talk about it in depth because it's a difficult place for me to travel back to.
Sure.
However, it was more than 5 years ago, and I reevaluated, and I was talking to, I believe it was Frank Pine from the San Bernardino Sun, a very decent person. He's now an executive producer. He's a big shot there. But he would he doesn't act like it and doesn't seem like it. But one question he asked me was, "Are you going to ride the bull, or you're not going to ride the bull?" And I go, "I'm going to ride the bull." And I kind of like that because I never heard that before, and it took me back to the Wyoming days. And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to ride the bull." And me riding the bull meant I'm going to continue to do the best job that I can do, and in the eye of the storm, hold my head up high, and be there for staff, be there for students, be there for parents, and do the best I can.
That's interesting, because it's you're the first person that I've had from that side. I say because you're not actually
that side. Dun dun dun. The administrator side.
The administrator side, and because it is a different situation, and a lot of times, and me included, sometimes people that are involved in school districts and people that have kids at school, you can be kind of critical of any job, teachers and things like that. So until you really sit down and talk to someone, and we had mentioned before, it is a business. For lack of a better term, because of all the ways that it's set up, employees, payroll, clients, customers, things like that. So your job in that role has a lot of stress to it, not in the same way working for IBM, but you have a lot more at stake from my point of view, because you're talking about the future.
I joke because I work with some wonderful, wonderful staff of people, and any success that I have, I attribute to the people around me.
Yeah.
I attribute to my mentors. I attribute to my family foundation, to a very supportive and wonderful husband who deals with a wife who is very, very on the go 24/7, to where at 11 o'clock at night he says, "Put the phone down now," and I have 14 to 16-hour days, but I can't complain about it. It's what I signed up for.
Sure.
And actually, you don't have room to complain in these kind of professions either, because there's so many people who are losing their jobs. There's so many people who, don't have anything anymore. And so it makes you internalize things and say, hey, you know what? Woe is not me.
Yeah.
It's not for me. I'm not a victim. You choose that role.
Sure.
You choose to be a victim. You choose to be a survivor. You choose to be a liver. I want to be a liver. I want to live. I want to have a good life, and I want to work hard for it. And yeah, there are absolutely so many different people. And you know what? I've met some of the best administrators. I've met some of the best teachers. I don't classify them as their role or their job description. I classify them as people. And so I've met some of the best people in any kind of work that I have been a part of. And so I'm very fortunate to be working in a school district that I absolutely love.
Well, and I can tell you, I sat here with Joe Baca Jr. A couple weeks ago.
Our coach from Rialto High.
From Rialto High School, yeah. And I told him the same thing. I said, it does me good inside to know that there's people that I know, I trust, that are fighting for Rialto, that are fighting for the Rialto schools.
Always.
Because it's still home, and not that I don't want success for where I live now or the kids in that area. I said, but it
always takes you home.
It's always going to be home, and I want those kids to have the same experiences that we had. And I want those kids to enjoy the teachers and the school district and the activities and all of the things that schools gave to us. And with Joe, I said, I want the people that live there to want to stay there because of all of the things he's doing to help upgrade the city, the new properties, the new restaurants, all of the things that they're doing to make it more appealing and for people to want to stay there. I said, that does me good. And in a way, I kind of have that. I live vicariously through you guys because it's good to see that. I enjoy seeing that on social media. Absolutely. I enjoy seeing the new projects or the things that are going on in the districts and the things that go on. I think I'm on 5 different Eisenhower Kolb Junior High.
Exactly.
Different things that I like to see that. And so it's always fun to see those things. And so I'm glad that they're putting that effort and that energy and that they have people like you doing the job that you do for.
Well, we have 19 elementary schools, and we have 5 middle schools that used to be junior high schools, and we have 3 comprehensive high school, 1 adult school, and one adult school, Zupanic Continuation School, and Myler Continuation School. So we're a big district now.
Yeah.
It's not that small anymore. And so when you have growth, you're going to have some pain, growing pains. You're going to have some, movement and transition and so forth. But I think we have a wonderful structure. We have good leadership. We have an excellent Board of Education that is always working towards the best decisions for students and parents and staff. It's not easy all the time. People don't understand that when you're a leader, no matter what you do, somebody in the back is going to say, they did it the wrong way.
Sure.
It can either engulf you in pain, or it can motivate you to continue to do better.
So I know you would probably know this. How many students in the Rialto Unified School District?
It'll be well over 25,000.
Wow, that's amazing.
25,300. I mean, we're still accepting applications. So come to the best school district ever. Yeah. So yeah, with our registration center in our schools, we are still, because August 10th starts distance learning. Yeah. So we still have some time to, and then I believe next week, which would be the first week of August, we are going to be handing out devices, textbooks, Chromebooks, those sorts of things at our school sites.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's, when you're going over the list of middle schools and high schools. So I think it was 3 middle schools and 1 high school.
When you were there?
When I was there.
Yeah.
It was
when Frisbee. We were there. When we were there.
Oh, that's right. I forget.
I'm not young. Why do we keep talking? Why can't we talk about this? Well, I'm very happy about my age, but I'm just saying, it's just, it's grown.
Yeah.
We just grew up really fast. Where did time go?
I don't. Well, that was almost 40 years ago, and I'm thinking back. There was it was Frisbee, it was Rialto Middle School, or Rialto Junior High, and Kolb Junior High.
Kolb Junior High, and I went to Kolb.
And so did I.
Okay.
And just Eisenhower.
High School, yeah. Right? And we had all nasty little names for other schools back then, because we were. We were bullies in those days. We just didn't know it. There was no bullying. We would just say things. And now kids are so much, I think they're so much better.
Well, it's kind of scary to go back and think of half of the things you did would no longer be allowed anymore.
Good. That's a good thing. That is an excellent thing. It shouldn't be. There was a smoking section, I believe, in those schools in the 70s at Eisenhower High School, right?
Yeah, there was one in the 80s, too.
Oh, there was? Okay, 80s, you're right.
Well, now, there was a designated, and then there was a non-designated.
I think by the time I was graduating, there was no smoking area anymore.
No, there wasn't.
Right,
so
maybe your own smoking area.
Not mine.
Not designated.
Not mine. Well, there was a designated on campus, and then there was those fast kids that could run past the JV baseball field and jump the fence into that field, which was now a movie theater, and I think so there was a lot of tree stumps there.
Oh, okay.
And so that was the non-designated smoking area.
We've just lost all of our listenership right now, talking about Rialto's smoking section at Eisenhower in the late 80s.
Most of the people that listen were probably there at the smoke, so they would remember that fondly.
Well, from their schools too. I'm sure that other schools, high schools, had little designated areas, but it has changed dramatically, which is good, because PBI has brought that, and we're gentler, we're kinder. We're trying to be better folks.
We are, yeah. And I know that because now I go through all the training at the middle school now, and it's totally different. But it is, nice to kind of reminisce about those days.
Yes, it is.
So let's shift gears a little bit, and let's go into your on-air media life now.
Broadcasting.
Broadcasting, yeah. So let's start about with your show that you had on. Was it KVCR?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember. PBS. Okay. So how did
television show?
Oh, television.
Or are you talking about KPOR, which is morning show?
Which was first?
Well, I got my start in radio 25 years ago.
Okay, so let's do the TV first, and then we'll transition.
TV was actually in 1997.
Okay.
Christina Hernandez and myself, who used to write for The Sun, she was one of my producers, and I was on air working with Bruce Vidal, the late Bruce Vidal, who's one of my mentors. Used to be on Kiss FM in the 80s and 90s for 14 years. He was a midday guy. Used to come on right after Rick Dees. Okay. And so he had mentored me and told me a lot about radio. And in 98, I believe, we started doing a morning show called K-Lite. Okay. K-L-I-T-E. Mm-hmm. And Jim Maddox was a program director who had hired me. And he flew in. He was from Fordham, New York. He flew in. Then he went to Westlake Village because there was a station there. And he said, "That's it. You're my morning girl." So I jumped on. He never said girl, to be honest with you. He's one of the most, there's no sexism in him at all. He's got beautiful daughters and wonderful, wonderful mentor. He said, "You're going to be my newswoman. Here's what I need you to do. And Bruce and I started working together, which was one of my dreams, to work with my mentor, right? And then in 3 years, the station went under. But during that transition, I went to KVCR because somebody had told me that, you could do some TV work. So for 10 years, I did work at KVCR. And it wasn't work. It was more volunteering. and had a show called, was a co-host of Evening Edition with Jeff Williams. And then after that, did a show called Greenworks with Peter Parks and a couple of really very, very, very intelligent and good directors and producers. And then that show was canceled. And then I jumped into working at the school district. And I always wanted to go back to television, but who knows, maybe one day I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how was that experience? Was that something that maybe...
Television was fun. It was great.
Had you thought about that prior to that happening?
You know, not when somebody came up to me. And I remember Mary Parks one time told me, you need to get into Los Angeles. You can do network news. It's very easy. And a wonderful gentleman by the name of Roger Harbar, who now is retired. He used to work one of the most wonderful cameramen for NBC, I believe, and did many network news, LA. And you got to respect anybody who has the longevity for the number 2 market in the nation, in Los Angeles. I mean, it's New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco. I mean, these are major markets. I never wanted to go to LA. I think deep down inside, I wanted to stay local. I wanted to stay in the Inland Empire. I wanted to, I wanted to stay home.
Sure.
And I think I could be successful at home. I'm not a person who chases numbers or wants, that much money. I want that many leadership. I want that many. I'm competitive, absolutely. But I think the connection is more important than the perfection. And I think that if you're really, really good at what you do and you really throw yourself into it and you're at home at night and you don't have a house and you can sleep in your car and you can still have that Del Taco, because I've done that, and you can go to work, you're going to get there. You're going to get all your things. But, you just have to work and be consistent and be consistently good at what you do and pay your dues. Do it that way. No shortcuts. And if you do that, you will achieve your dream. You have to believe that in yourself. And so when I worked with Bruce Vidal, he told me, hey, kid, go over there. Because he always used to say, kid, go over there, give it a try. You don't have a face for radio, is what he would say. And I'm like, I don't know about all that. I think that's secondary anyways. I think that it's such a misconception. It's such an extremely sexist way of looking at things when somebody says a woman has to have the look for television and a man doesn't necessarily, because some of the men that I used to watch in network news in the 80s, Walter Cronkite, I really don't think he's that dashing, no disrespect. Or, Frank Reynolds or Dan Rather or Peter Jennings. And I'm thinking to myself, why do the women always have to be so appealing physically? This is just not a really, I don't know, there's nothing kosher, nothing organic about that. And I like to listen to news because I want somebody believable. I really don't care if their lipstick and their nails are matching. But it's a shame. I don't know when we're going to get out of that concept.
What's interesting, because, just growing up, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so what someone finds attractive may not be, and so
those executive producer males maybe are looking through those lenses at that time,
right? Is what I'm thinking, and again, you try to diversify, because if you look, you mentioned like Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, maybe they just gave some people in that demographic a better feeling, than a younger guy with a goatee and long hair. And it's like I said, it's just one of those.
It's very unfair. I just think, in the sense that a woman is judged based upon her beauty and her elegance and the way she looks and the way she's perceived. Yet a man can have those same qualifications on paper, and they can throw a suit on him, and guess what? You're going to listen to him, and he's going to be clean him up a little bit. You don't even have to clean some of them up a little bit. So it's like, we don't need the eye candy, just the men do. So I think there's something a little not right, straight up good about that.
And we're still fighting.
I don't think we've come that. Yeah, I don't think we've come that far. But that's an entirely different show.
It is. No, that's part 2, because we're getting on that. So going along the TV route, tell me a little bit about what you did on the show.
I was actually the Greenworks show was for 3 years, and on PBS. We were nominated for an Emmy as well. Peter Parks was one of the main people on there, and I worked very closely with him, and he's still a good friend to this day. He's at Lucas Oil now. But we did green environmental shows talking about sustainability. Okay. I do understand that the administration right now doesn't believe in science, but science and climate change was very much a part of our life in California. Whether we want to turn a blind eye or not, that's up to them. However, that was the show that we had done on PBS as well. And there was some funding issues and there's some other things, but it was a very good experience. I'm comfortable on television. I'm comfortable in radio, and I'm comfortable with people. I like to consider myself a people person. It's not anything that's scary to me, talking to 100 people, thousands of people, or one person. I really genuinely enjoy the company of people. I think it's good to put information out. It's good to share. And that's what we did with PBS. It was very quality-based, local show. And one day, hopefully, if I have an opportunity, I'd love to get back into it.
Now, can you find that show anywhere? YouTube,
you know what? No, and I'll tell you why. We do have some CDs, but remember, this is in the 1990s, right. Which doesn't seem that far away. But I think 2005, 2006 is when... 2010 actually is when Twitter came on board. They're just celebrating 10 years of Twitter or 15 years of Facebook. So this was way back when. And so this is past 15 years ago. And so after that, when I did from 1997 to 2007, KVCR, PBS television, and then 2008, I jumped into working at KCAL, the radio station.
So just
went back to my first love.
Back to your first love, but to your going back to the KVCR days, I'm curious about that, because usually you mentioned funding. What other jobs did you have to do on there? Because I know usually when it's a smaller station, you kind of pitch in everywhere because everyone has to help.
Right, and I think because I was considered the on-air act, I was the talent, is what they call it. Whether you're on radio, in front of the microphone, you're talent. Anything behind that is probably that's where you get the money. That's a little bit more lucrative. But there was a lot of freelancing at that time. There was a couple of people that were full-time employees at that time. But PBS is an interesting field because it's generated by sponsorships and donations. You really don't have those, corporate major sponsor. Pepsi's not going to go to PBS. They want to keep it very kosher and very organic. Not to say that network news isn't or cable news isn't. So it's always, PBS always has some sort of funding issues at every level. And I didn't do it for the money, obviously. Didn't do it for funding. I did it because it was a passion. I was asked. I passed a couple of camera tests at that time, and which was, again, funny to me. I'm like, what? And things were mentioned, like your nose is a little crooked and, one of your eyes. These are things I didn't even know about myself. And I thought, oh, this is television. How interesting. And yes, there would be people who would tell you if you're a little heavy.
Wow.
And they would tell you like where you were heavy, and you accept it or you can leave. And that's okay. That's nothing that I'm saying here, which hasn't been said to another woman before that is on either network TV or local TV or some sort of, because television is a visual medium.
Sure.
So there's a certain expectation for women that doesn't necessarily cross over to the male gene, which I'll never understand. But I went with it, and we did have somebody who did my hair. We did have somebody who did my makeup. But my content was what was important to me. I think the content is always important. Anybody can do everything, but you're not going to last if you don't have the substance.
Right.
There has to be some sort of substance in your life. And so that's what I tell, and that's what I mentor my youth, that through DSAC, which is District Student Advisory Committee, which for the last 10 years, our offices, what we do is we take these students, and they're all from different grade levels, from elementary and high school levels. Just to jump back to that, we mentor these students and kind of, so in that way that I have an opportunity once or twice a month to teach as well, along with the communications device. And I tell them, as I'm telling your audience today, substance is important if you want to maintain your relevance and your integrity in what you're doing. Doesn't make a difference what you're doing. Radio, television, print, journalism, any kind of medium, private sector, public sector, have your integrity and have your substance with you at all times. So you know your job. So going back to KVCR, going back to any form of television, and I did start off with Booker at Channel 3. My first person that I ever interviewed was my father's neighbor, MC Ren of NWA. So, I was very comfortable interviewing him. I told him, no bad words, Ren. And he would laugh. He's like, oh, come on, Syeda. Oh, come on, no bad words. Because he had just gotten, and this was again in the late 90s, he was Rolling Stone's top 100 rock and rollers. And it was NWA, which is a hip hop group, gangster rap. But at the same time, he had a wonderful story to tell. And so these are the kind of it's always it's a trip for me. I always have a great time interviewing high-profile people, whether it's rock and rollers or people in the music industry. They're very colorful.
Yeah.
Very, very artistic.
Well, and I think when you do interviews like that, and we'll get more into that in a minute, but it's always nice to hear beyond what everyone knows. Everyone knows the story that is printed and the glamorization part of it, but to know how they got there. And to me, it's the same thing like we had talked before. You know, some people that come in, they may not find themselves that's interesting, but everybody has a story. Everybody has a journey, for lack of a better word, how they got where they were. And I enjoy putting that out for the kids because they hear it from us, but you know, at some point it would become white noise because they hear it from me every week.
Right.
But if you hear someone else going, this is what we went through, this is how I went through it, I had this hurdle, I had that hurdle, now they start to see that everyone is going to come through adversity, but not everyone lets that fold them up. Everyone has a different way. It may not be a straight line to where I want to go, but sometimes those rights and lefts make me better when I get there.
You're absolutely right.
And that's the part I enjoy hearing about people's backgrounds and how they got there, because there's so many different ways now, and you know this with education, a lot of the things that we're training kids for, the jobs haven't even been created yet.
Absolutely.
There's so many different ways through social media that people are making money. There's so many different jobs.
The innovation piece, the STEM, the STEAM, you're 100% right.
Yeah. It's almost trying to let them just, rather than close off your mind to what you traditionally feel you could do, and just run with what you think you're capable of doing. There's technically nothing that you want to do that's crazy.
In a conventional 1940s, 50s, 60s, even up to 70s, parents were teaching the kids, and now we have children who tell their parents, oh, you're not doing that right. This is how you text. Yeah. This is how you put this message in. This is what you need to do. Get this app. This is how you do it, which is wonderful. Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, the more the younger generation knows, the better it is for us.
Well, that's how society evolves. And we talk about that as coaches, you know, joking that the best way to be a coach is to understand and be okay with the fact that you're trying to help someone get farther up the ladder than you ever did. And bury that ego and take pride in that for them rather than a competition. Or understand that when kids come in today to work with you, they may have more knowledge and understanding of what we're trying to teach them than we do.
Absolutely.
We just have more practical application and experience at it. So it's
and
very...
you need both. You need to balance that both out.
Right. And getting them to understand, too. Because, again, when you learn things, you may not see all of the pitfalls that get there. And sometimes that's what helps you be more creative, is understanding those slips and bumps. And so it's very, very interesting to hear that. So from television, we transitioned into KCAL, which is where you are now. And so, again, just so you know, I have my Jim Morrison Doors shirt on.
Oh, yeah.
And now
the Lizard King.
I was expecting KCAL, Syeda, and she came in as professional. So when we reference part 2, that's what we're doing. There's going to be a part 2 where she comes in as morning DJ.
I will. And I love that shirt because Jim Morrison is one of my favorite artists that just, inspires me whenever I play Break On Through or Love Her Madly or LA Woman. I go crazy. And of course, he's such a Adonis. Road to Excess leads to the Palace of Wisdom, William Blake.
You know, I don't know how they ended up being one of my favorites, but there's probably everything that they have on my phone.
Oh, the Doors.
And I'm not a big reader. I wish I was. But that's one of the few books that I've read.
No One Here Gets Out Alive?
No One Here Gets Out Alive. And the funny part is it's just so open. And you lose track of where he's going some points. Yeah. It makes it more interesting. And just listening to some of the old video, and now all the videos pop up on all these different Instagram pages.
Just Google it, and that's your encyclopedia. That is you do read. See, you watch, you read, and you know more about this person than ever. Because and that's the beauty of it, is that there's so many outlets of information out there. Sure. It's kind of scary what's real and what's not. People could just put something out there and you're like, that's not true.
Well, and watching this, like I said, I like to go back, and partly because I'm an old guy and that's what we do, I like to go back and look at that old footage, you know, Elvis Presley, Jim Morrison, the Beatles, and you try to think about how chaotic that was at that time in 1960, because some of that looks chaotic to me right now. And that's not including some of the things that I've already seen. But you look at that and you think, wow, you kind of want the kids to experience that, because it was just it seems so pure and organic when you see these, and you're into it more. You see these videos of these young women just fainting when the guys they're just so overwhelmed with emotion that I'm this close to Jim Morrison or the Beatles or any rock star. I just don't know that the kids aren't so desensitized anymore that they don't get that pure excitement.
I think they're a lot more mature now too, though.
Yeah,
I don't see the younger generation going to rock concerts and trying to, pull somebody's hair or trying to grab somebody's boot or something.
Yeah.
You don't see that kind of frenzy.
Sure.
But remember, the frenzy was because there was absolutely no social media back then.
That's true.
The only way that they could see their rock idols or their heroes or, country idols, whoever it was through newspapers, through clippings, through them coming to the artists coming through town, through an interview on Ed Sullivan or on the Dick Cavett show or some sort of show, or Johnny Carson, and that's all you had.
Right.
Now, if I want a picture of your shirt, Jim Morrison, I could probably buy the shirt. I could just go through all these images. I can get a fulfillment, and it's called like an instant gratification. I don't have to wait. And back then, they waited for that. So when they finally saw them, whether it was the Beatles, whether it was, it was a frenzy. And these are young girls who were sheltered in the 50s, 60s, up to the 70s until the hippie movement came in. And that's when everything broke loose. It was like, okay, we are all about freedom now because we've just had it with the conventional structured lifestyle. And that's when you're cooped up and when you're sheltered and when you're in this, like, Maya Angelou, now I know why the cage birds, when you're talking about a cage bird and when they're already out, then you can't bring that bird back in.
Right,
it's not going back in, And so I think that's what it was with music as well. It's evolved. And as far as talking about old timers, I have listeners at KCAL who contact me through the hotline, or they'll tell me they're listening to the Doors. Their favorite group is the Beatles. And I'm so proud because I'm thinking there's a new generation of fan base. So when you have greatness, when you have something that matters, that substance we were talking about, it's got longevity. Yeah. It's not just a flash in the pan. I don't have that many calls doing that with Vanilla Ice. I don't have, you know what I'm saying? It's like when you're a pure artist, it's just like with Queen. It's just like with the Stones. It's like any kind of music. Rage Against the Machine. 20 years later, hello. People are still interested in because people are very personal about a lot of things. And we talked about this. Sure. You want to upset somebody real quickly, talk about somebody's religion, politics, or music. You're going to upset somebody real quickly. So those are three things I just like to listen to and back away and say, you're not getting me there.
Well, it was a toss-up between Jim Morrison and Vanilla Ice, and Jim Morrison won today.
Thank you.
I didn't wear the Vanilla Ice
Thank you for that.
I imagine
there's a visual I don't need in front of me for an hour.
I imagine they sell those, but I wouldn't know where. But so, other than the obvious at KCAL, you're on Saturday mornings, and you start at the ungodly hour of 6 a.m.
I wake up at 3:30. My husband's real excited about that part. And then I'm at the station by 5:15 in Redlands, and then 6 o'clock. Come 6 o'clock, gotta put my mic on. And I do want to let you know, in 13 years on KCAL, I have not been late once. Knock on wood. Of course, this wouldn't be wood.
It's particle board.
What a silly thing to be so proud of. But I've made it to work on time, and I leave on time.
Well, that's
so Daryl's happy with me there.
Yeah, that's something to be said, because nobody wants that 3 a.m. Hey, Syeda didn't make it.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you, and this is my curiosity, what goes on at 3:30 when you don't go on until? Well,
it's funny because the world is still traveling. A lot of people don't understand that on Saturday and Sundays there's a segment of society. Our society works. We're in the Inland Empire. It's a very job-driven area, and so and the jobs are growing. And there's many families that have to work weekends. I'm working weekends. I don't look at my 6 to 10 a.m. Probably doesn't look like a job when you're sitting there playing rock and roll. That's the best job ever. Sure. So I'm very blessed, but it's still some responsibilities attached to that. So while I'm going to work, there's other people on the road, believe it or not, at 4 o'clock, at 4:15. Come 5 o'clock, I'm at my local coffee shop and there's cars behind me getting their same coffee. Most of them don't know that it's Syeda, and they don't need to. They just need to know that there's somebody going to be on the air who's going to give them a little bit of traffic information, talk a little bit about what happened last night or night before. That's important. Click on that mic and play their music. It becomes about them. It's not my show. It's their show. I'm just facilitating. So I get up there and I talk, and it's a wonderful party atmosphere for me, because they're like, hey, thanks for playing this. Hey, thanks for playing that. And it's just my public service that I do. And I love music. I genuinely, I just think music is the universal language. That's one of Rialto Unified School District's strategic plan. It is one of our sayings. And it is. Music can build people together. It brings, at a time when there was war, those concerts that were being held in Bangladesh or Live Aid or Farm Aid or USA for Africa.
Sure.
It was music that stepped up. It was rockers who stepped up and said, we're going to help the famine. We're going to do our part. And so artists are very special people. They're not just, that whole era of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I think that's going away a little bit. And it's more, again, substance oriented. The Stones don't last that long because Mick Jagger's a cutie, because Mick Jagger may not be a cutie anymore, right? But their songs still hit you. Put on You Can't Always Get What You Want. Put on Satisfaction, and put on Give Me Shelter. Tell me that you don't feel something. Yeah. And then that's what matters. So music is a very personal thing for people.
Sure.
So, and I love giving them that high.
It's interesting because, again, it's still teaching. So I'm asking you again, because you go at your business at 3 a.m., 3:30, and you're there all the time.
Well, I'm up at 3:30.
Yeah,
I'm probably going to be there closer to 5.
Okay. And so, I mean, again, that probably came back. I'm going to guess you were probably the kid in school that didn't miss a day, 3 years, 4 years.
You know what? I was described as very shy in school. I was a drill team captain. I tried a little bit of cheerleading. I was involved in volleyball, but I was in journalism, and I was a good kid. I tried to be a good kid. Yeah. I wasn't somebody who was getting in trouble due to the respect of the fact that my father worked so hard and my mother worked so hard. I don't need to go home. And, I came from the mindset of, if I go home and tell my parents that my teacher's mad, they're going to ask me what I did wrong, not what the teacher did wrong first.
The old days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's still, believe it or not, there is a big, large segment of society that does that still. Thank goodness, because they do. It's okay to respect the child and say, I want your side, but you got to know your child. You have to know that you don't have perfect children. You have to know that there's no perfect teacher. There's a lot more communication going on now too, because there might have been times back then when it wasn't the child's fault, but the child was blamed. So there's two sides to that, right?
That's true.
And so want to make sure that we at least balance it out. It's not always one person's fault or the other person's fault, but that's the mindset I came from. So yes, I guess you could probably call it a little bit of Pollyanna. Not dating, not doing anything. It's kind of embarrassing because I want to be that hip, cool person. But technically, I was very disciplined and determined.
Well, look at that. You got it, because now you're the DJ and you're playing rock and roll on Saturday morning. So you got to be the hip cool person.
Right.
Because we all wanted to do that at one point. And so, one of the things that you do is you have interviews and you're involved in a lot of things that are off air, the things that go on with KCAL promotions and things like that. So again, I know, we've talked about some of the people that you've interviewed. So not necessarily on a flash or notoriety level. Who do you think is probably the most interesting interview you've had?
That I felt?
That you felt was the most interesting.
With KCAL, anyway. I think the morning show does a lot more of the interviews with the celebrities. Now that I'm on weekends, I didn't, but there was times when I filled in, even at Light FM when I was on the morning show. Filled in. I will probably tell you there's a handful of people overnights when I was on KFI. We had done Scott Green. He passed away, but I was on his show and we interviewed Tracy Davis, who was Sammy Davis Jr.'s daughter. And I found that to be a fascinating interview because she's such an intelligent young lady. She had written a book, Sammy Davis Jr., my father, and she talked about her life. And when your godfather is Frank Sinatra, right, and you're sitting there trying to ask questions and you are a little intimidated. And so she was a wonderful interview because she gave so much in-depth knowledge about her life and what it was like, because back then the Rat Pack in the 50s and the 60s, they owned Vegas. You know, they were the only show in town. Again, you don't have social media, you don't have anything. You've just got 5 channels on your television screen and a radio, and that's it. And so they become kind of demigods to people. And so I felt that was a good interview. At KVCR, when I interviewed Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney's stepsister, half-sister Ruth McCartney, and his stepmom Angie McCartney, I thought that was a wonderful interview. On KCAL, I had the opportunity to actually interview Tommy Chong. He was a hoot. Such an intelligent person,
right? And that's what I was going to say. That's what I've heard. But you see some of those celebrities that play certain roles, and you almost know they've got to be so smart to play that role well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's some tragedies when I went in about I'd say 2007, 2008. It's probably 2007. One of the last interviews that we had done was with Quiet Riot, Kevin DuBrow. He passed away. I believe there was some substance abuse involved, allegedly, I suppose. But it's sad because you remember the good. Right. You remember the good things about people, and you also have an opportunity to get a glimpse into their life and to not make it difficult for them. Because obviously, when you're a songwriter, when you're a poet, when you are a rock star, or it comes with a lot of pressure. It comes with a tremendous amount of the image, the pressures, the loneliness, the being on the road, just so many things in their lives. It's a hurdle, and people just think, money, but they make so much money. Again, that money is not it can keep you happy for a certain amount of time, but then you need something else. And when they lack that, and when you have everything in the world for you, what do? You channel your interest into drugs, alcohol, self-loathing, self-doubt, and those kind of things into your and because by nature, when you're a poet, when you're a writer, there's sensitivity. You're sensitive people. I've always been fascinated with people who are so hard on people who are artists, because there's a reason they're doing what they're doing. And so we live in a society that's quick to judge and be critical, and it's harder for them to take a step back and have empathy. And I'm so happy because our younger generation doesn't seem to be like that as much.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because you'd mentioned something before where once you become a public figure in any form, you belong to the public. And you lose that privilege, for lack of a better word, of being your own person. And then it also ties into what you had mentioned about being a female on television. I see these magazine pictures where so-and-so going to the grocery store and she's in sweats and her hair's not done. I'm thinking, who would let them do that, But they don't have a choice. You're a celebrity. I saw you. I'm going to take that picture and I'm going to put it everywhere. Or, someone put on 15 pounds and it's on the cover of a magazine. Or when you're in that type of environment and you go out, you have to be on all the time. You can't have a bad day in public, because then it's thrown out.
And it's harder, I think, for women. And I say this, but, in my field, which is transcending over 25 years, no matter what, I have been called heavy. But the word hasn't been heavy, it's been fat. I've been called a lot of things, or, God bless my program directors, who I really want to thank right now, because whenever people say, you're doing a great job, or you're wonderful, you're this, you're that, I trusted some very, very bright, intelligent program directors. And just to give you a couple names, Jim Maddox, who got my start in morning radio, and then Steve Hoffman, who has a very strange sense of humor, but always gave me some great advice when I needed it. And he was an attorney too, so that helped at KCAL. And then Daryl Norcell, who actually is on the air at KCAL full time, but he had me come in, and I did not know how to run a board, because I was coddled. It's like, you're a woman, you sit in the corner, you're going to do the news, you can do this, you can do that, the big boys are going to play this. And he's like, come here, Syeda. It's really easy. And I'm looking at him thinking, Daryl, you're doing this. I can't do this. And I grew up listening to him. So I'm like, oh, Daryl. Well, he sits down and shows me I go, well, this isn't hard. And then my first KCAL shift, hello, thousands of people listening. I'm going to mess up. He goes, that's right. He goes, don't worry, Syeda. I will not be listening to you. It's your first shift. Ta-da! I did mess up. I'm like, oh, for my next trick. And then for my next trick, I go, oh my gosh, why am I playing Aussie next to this, next to that? Oh my gosh, AC/DC back to back. He didn't have that programmed. And then I found out he did listen. But how forgiving, how kind, how wonderful. Not to say, and these are the kind of jobs. There's a difference between public sector and private sector.
Sure.
Public sector, you can make a lot of mistakes and you get moved around or you get shuffled in a private sector, it's very easy to say who's next. You need to have a general manager like Jeff Parks who's like understanding, and he's with COLA, he's with KCAL. When you're in a place where people are nurturing and there's harmony and there's kindness and there's agency, not top down, but we're going to help you through this, you want to stay.
Sure.
And pretty soon that little brown girl from Pakistan who's a little gawky, kind of square because she doesn't drink, and kind of a little different, because she's really not into these rock stars, but she loves playing the music. That person can become cool. Yeah. You can find a way to relate to them because with radio, you can't see the person like we mentioned. Yeah. And so it is very much theater of the mind. So I think I got accepted, but I was very lucky because I did not do this by myself. I had some really good people behind me who assisted me and helped me and guided me. And, in any facet of what I did. I mean, in my publisher, Bill Harrison, was wonderful for 10 years when I was an editor. I wanted to fight. I wanted to part the Red Sea every single day. Every day there was a scandal. Every day somebody's doing something wrong in City Hall. But he was supportive and nurturing. And I think because I've had that kind of support system, I want to do the same. That's how I would honor them, is to give back to them by saying, I'm going to help you to get where you're going to go.
Yeah, which is the fun part of it, that giving back. That is.
You mentor. There you go.
So this is one of my weird questions. So 15 years on the air, and we talked about...
25 years on the air, 15 years, with, almost 13 and a half with KCAL.
KCAL. So you've got that morning slot, and so there's 400, I'm guessing, other radio stations that people could go on to. So you have your own following. And so some people wake up every Saturday morning and their day doesn't start right if you're not there. Do you feel that same sense of responsibility?
I do. I know that there's about, 13 or 14 people for sure. I know, 13, 14 people, that's it, that I know of that will call and say, hey, thanks for playing this song. Hey, how you doing? Oh, you were so funny here. Of course I do. I think that people get into this field because of their love for music, because they want to connect with people.
Sure.
And we are about connection, and that's what Daryl, and this is what we're always, it's not that we're programmed to believe it. You either have it or you don't. You can't be anything other than yourself on radio. I can't be Wolfman Jack. Right. I can't be the D's. I can't be Bruce Vidal. I can't be Seacrest. I have to be Syeda Jafri. Sure. And if I'm not Syeda, if I'm not me, they'll know.
Yeah.
And they will know because they know I'm a little quirky. They know that I have little witty, smart aleck comments in between. And I'm not going to, pussyfoot around anything. I just say what I want to say. I have the faith and the confidence of the staff to say, okay, let Syeda do what she's got to do. And I'm a little different. I'm very different. But they know that I know my music. I enjoy it. And it works. And absolutely. If it wasn't for the listeners, I wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Because in radio, it's the connection piece.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned earlier that once you go on, the show is about the listeners.
It's about the listeners.
And so when I started breaking all that down, I was thinking, like you had mentioned, you used to listen to Daryl, or I remember it was KMET at
the Mighty Met.
The Mighty Met, or
KLOS.
Sunday night, Dr. Demento. So every Sunday. And then, you get older and you're driving at certain times. And so it's Kevin and Bean, or it's, KLOS. I can't remember all the different DJs. But, you remember
the LA Jocks.
Yeah, you remember certain DJs from different radio stations.
Absolutely.
And you might switch. Now for me, it's sports radio. I'll listen to one sports rather than the other.
I hope you're listening to KCAL.
On Saturdays.
Oh,
like
good.
I said, I catch you from 9:30 to 10 when I wake up.
Well, see, you're one of my listeners. Yay, I've got one.
6:30 now.
I got one.
No, we played at the shop when I go into work.
Right.
So tomorrow morning.
Awesome.
Tomorrow morning. Now, the hard part is I usually play country, or we have to program something. And because we have kids in there, so I can't have a lot of, NWA or some things playing in there because we have parents that sit there. So, I just kind of tell them, hey, this is a personal friend of mine, so kind of bear with it. She's not picking the music. But she's playing her favorite. So, and a lot of the parents...
some of it.
Well,
for everybody who likes this song, there's somebody else who wants to hear another song.
Yeah.
So you keep it on long enough, your song is going to come around.
I know, but ours is more the parental consent content that I have to play.
Okay.
Because with country, most of the time you're okay. There's not a lot of... They're not going to stray off on that
But if you play
tangent.
It backwards, you know what you hear.
Probably, yeah.
The dog dying and people committing suicide in the country.
I use it more as kind of background music just so the kids don't hear the bats and me droning on all the time. It's just something to kind of keep them calm.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so Saturday mornings, I put you on in there.
Thank you.
But that's one of the things that I enjoy about it because I like teaching that too. I talk about music to the kids, and a lot of these guys, if they never play, high schools now, some of them do it, but a lot of them, if they never play at the college level or beyond, it was always cool to have batting practice with music on it. You go to a college game and they've got their own mix of music for the guys to hit with, and there's just something about that now that music relates to baseball because you hear it during practice, so I like to put it on and we talk about that, and I try to explain to them it's because what you're trying to do is a skill that you want to get to some point where you're comfortable. It's just at ease. You're not stressed about it. It's still sports. As much as you want to put seriousness behind it and there's money involved at certain levels, it's still fun.
Right.
I want to enjoy the craft of what I like to do, the work behind it.
Yeah.
If I don't enjoy that part, I'm not going to be successful beyond that. So that's one of the reasons that we play different music, and we'll talk. Some kids are more chatty than others, and they talk more about music than. But that's one of those things that just comes with it. But so the next question about working at KCAL, if you had to pick a decade of music, what would be your favorite? As far back as you want. You probably don't know 1940s, but...
No, and I'm not going to pick 1940s. I'm sorry. Well, of course, the 50s was Chuck Berry and Little Richard. And every generation of rock and roll is really the stepchild of rhythm and blues and a little bit of the soul and a little bit of country. Everything's mixed in. Yeah. And then it came up... Rock and roll is a spirit. Sure. More than just music, but... That's very tough because my two favorite generations were the 90s and the 70s. I loved 70s rock and I loved 90s rock. When that grunge scene came in, it's like rock and roll was just fading. I mean, you had all those 80s hair bands and all this stuff, and it was just like kind of sitting there. And then all of a sudden, Seattle came in. This town, Seattle, Washington, woke everybody up and said, hi, we're grunge and we're here. And then you had Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, all these bands coming at you. And you're like, whoa, what form of rock and roll is this? Yeah. What kind of attitude is this? And grunge just grabbed you again. And my gosh, if you're going to be grabbed by anybody, make sure it's Eddie Vedder. So, you got those looks. You were like, oh, it's Mojo Rising again. You're looking at Vedder and you're thinking, wow. And of course, it would be him I think it was in the 90s where they, Hall of Fame, Eddie Vedder inducted the Doors in the Hall of Fame. But I think 90s rock is great. And I love 70s rock. Honestly, that would be my two genre if you were to ask me. Because 70s brought just that freedom, that spirit, Zeppelin at their height of their game. And you had such great, now that we considered classic. Sure. But the Eagles jumped on board, and my goodness, it was a little bit of country in there. You had a little bit of like soul in there, and it was still rock. You can't put on Freebird and you can't put on Hotel California and say, what's this music? You're like, yes. So it was a very defining time of rock and roll, and can't forget Pink Floyd. So I had my favorites as well. And whenever, I look at Gimme Shelter, I smile because I'm like, oh, Daryl, thanks. You got Gimme Shelter on here. It's nice to wake up to that. Or if you have like Hotel California. Sure. And then the 90s. Anytime I'm playing 90s music, I'm in heaven because the 90s was a special place in my life at that time. In the 70s, I was born in the 70s. So, sure. You go through those. Music takes you back to the generation where you were happy. It also takes you back to a time when you were confused or sad. Sure. And then you start returning to that. And I would probably definitely say the 70s and the 90s. Yeah. That was it for me.
Huh. That's very interesting. You missed the 80s altogether.
All to 80s. Oh my God. That the tacky makeup. And when men were like Oh gosh, Motley Crue and you had your Great White, you had your Motley Crue, you had your Rat, and trust me, when I went to Rocklahoma, I saw all those 80 hair bands, and I saw Bret Michaels, and I'm like, oh my goodness, all those, the tacky makeup and the crazy hair. And I think, see, again, that wasn't like the time when I mean, 80s had some great rock and roll. Right, don't get me wrong. Right. 80s rock was great. You had, you had AC/DC. You had a lot of great rock. Right. But I wanted to talk about what influenced me more, and it was the 70s. The 80s was great, and it took us to the 90s. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know that I probably listened to more 80s.
Did you? Yeah.
Well, I was in high school in the 80s, so that's right. And so I think, but I can even go back and think 50s because my parents would listen to that kind of music.
You're right.
I love listening to Elvis Presley. I love listening to Buddy Holly. I love listening to Richie Valens. And so
they started it all off.
Yeah.
It started with them.
And then coming back all the way through. Most
Chuck
of the
Berry.
Time when we break up the country at the shop, most of my guys are in their mid-30s, so I'll play 90s or 2000 rock. And so that's a lot of what I hear when you're playing too. So I don't really think that I have a genre that I don't enjoy.
It's very difficult. It is very, very difficult to say what genre, I mean, I just kind of felt like even with Guns N' Roses, 89 is when they technically came, but 90s is when they just, where is this band coming from? Yeah. And you can see that they were the only ones that weren't that kind of grunge when grunge was taken over in the 90s. And of course, in the mid 90s, they were out the door doing their own thing. And I think for a band, very rarely do you get the Stones or you get the that type where they've got that longevity of keep going and going and going. You're going to hit a roadblock somewhere. Yeah. Whether you're Pink Floyd, whether you're Roger Waters and David Gilmour, you have so many talented people, and everybody has their own way of thinking, and so you're not going to see eye to eye. So those 4, 5, 6 years for a band is probably the most pivotal years of their life.
Well, or like you just mentioned too, some people gravitate to certain bands during certain times in their life, and then you evolve past it. You get married, you have kids, you go to college, and all those things change. Your tastes change, your friends change, and what they listen to and what you listen to. And I mean, I still enjoy jazz every now and then.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That's something different for me, and I'll just a lot of times to listen to and just no words at all.
Right.
And there's even there's a teacher at school that I always joke with her because I'll go in her classroom and she finds all of these songs without the words. And I walk in and I said, I kind of want to lay down on your floor because it feels like a spa because she has the little spray in there and it smells like you walk into one of these spas and you're playing music that I feel like it should be a little bit louder, but it's just the kind of music. But no, they take this hard rock song and they turn it into this jazz. But it's kind of unique and that's what she's into. But it's just funny listening to the different types of music. And, I'm wondering, you said Cola and KCAL, are they
sister stations? Okay. And they play similar. Yeah. Some of the Cola music is there as well. Yeah. And, I listen to Cola. I'll listen to KCAL. I'm very, very fortunate that I love the music that I play. Sure. I'm not one of these people that, I can't stand this music. Then what the heck are you doing DJing at the station? Right. Do love what you're doing. Promote it, be passionate about it, and enjoy it. There are some people who aren't, and that's okay. But I actually, I love sports, but I'm not going to jump in and be a sportscaster. It's not for me. You really need to have the passion for it. Yeah. And so when I look at my song list, I'm like, ooh, there's a good one. Ooh, there's another good one. So I'm enjoying my job. Sure. I'm having a good time with my listeners. Yeah. And that's what you should do. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. No, it is. Any job that you can enjoy is a good job.
And I think people see through it. I think maybe in 15 or 14, going on 14 years now at KCAL, ending my 13th year, I know once or twice somebody said, hey, Syeda, are you having a bad day? I'm like, oh, geez. I'm all, what do you mean? I don't need to get fired for this, do I? But, because maybe they didn't hear me after 3 or 4 songs or something. And I told them, last week my dad died. But I'm on the radio. And it wasn't because KCAL forced me. Right. It's because I got to get out of this. Sure. And so you get out of things. Sure. And it's such a beautiful medium. Right. It's one of the greatest mediums ever because people know you and you know them even though you've never met them. Yeah.
Which is cool. That's...
Or they've never had the chance to meet you, which I love to do, by the way. I love to meet my listeners.
Well, so going into that, I imagine COVID and all of this stuff, you were attended some concerts.
Oh, yeah.
Past and current and up to now. So not necessarily separating any bands or musicians or things, but what to you was your most favorite concert?
Oh, wow. Okay, bad with the years.
It could just be a band or maybe a venue that you enjoy.
I absolutely love listening to Rage. Rage was a great concert. My husband took me to Korn in San Diego, and Jonathan Davis Davis had come to KCAL a couple times as well, but Korn was good. We saw them in San Diego, and gosh, there's so many. I mean, in my lifetime, my first concert was The Police. My father took me to go see that in the mid '80s, and I was a kid. I mean, my father to drive to the Hollywood Bowl. Okay. For 2 hours from Rialto, wait in a car, and then tell me when you come outside, there's a phone booth, call me, I'll meet you at this area, that area. He went through all that. Yeah. Because, when I was 12 and a half going on 13, I wanted to marry Sting of The Police. And that was my, and he nurtured that. Yeah. So I think that was a great concert, by the way. The Police, Synchronicity.
Say, your dad's a good man.
Yeah, well, Synchronicity.
Looking back on that 40 years from now. And, again, maybe it's just me because it's 80s music. That would be one of those where from a baseball side, I go, hey, I saw Babe Ruth take his last at bat. I mean, to be able to look at that and go, hey, I saw The Police in their peak at the Hollywood Bowl.
Right. And then one of the DJs at KCAL, this was about 5 years ago, him and I went to go see Roger Waters in LA. That was really good. So it's very difficult for me because I try not to get attached to the artist. I like the music. Sure. And so whether I go backstage or whether I just watch them, I'm a very normal, ordinary person that lives a very extraordinary life. Yeah. I'm appreciative of the gift I have, that I can use my voice to make other people happy. Sure. And so I don't try to exploit that. I definitely try not to overstep my boundaries on that. Like I have to go backstage to everything. If I like somebody, sure, I will. If I don't, I don't. And I think that sometimes people get too starstruck. They get too excited. And you have to understand, these are human beings just playing a song, playing music for you for a couple hours. Sit down, enjoy it, go home, and enjoy the rest of your life as much as you can.
Well, and I think from my end, I don't necessarily think it's more of a starstruck thing, because I've thought about this before. With different athletes and just watching different things. I think sometimes we don't really appreciate certain snapshots in time until we get older. And so when you're thinking about, when you said that, I'm thinking, okay, that had to be about this time, to have a band and to be an artist and to have your message impact as many people as millions. It did through TV, through Live Aid, through whatever the medium was at that time. That's something that is very hard to recreate.
Right.
And as a musician, they're trying to recreate that. Or, you even talk about, since we're talking 80s a little bit, there's so many songs that across the time, 60s, 70s, those one-hit wonders. But for an artist, that one painting, that one song that people know.
It meant something to them.
Yeah, and it meant something to a lot of people.
And for a brief moment, they were somebody.
Yeah. And that, to me, it's more of an appreciation because that person attained their goal.
Right.
And that's kind of how I look at it. Like, wow, how cool is it to whatever it is, if you're a TV personality, an actor, whatever it is, to get to that peak of your chosen.
Right. And, I'll tell you a funny story about that. Actually, a sad story about that. When I was at Light FM and we were doing morning radio, David Cassidy was coming into town. I don't know if it was at Pachanga, one of the local, I don't know if it was Pachanga, San Manuel, or Morongo, one of the local casinos. Yeah. And we interviewed him on the air. And so, he'd called in and, I joked, I said, hey, in the late 70s, do you know David Cassidy? And I'm sure that I saw some reruns of The Partridge Family. Sure. And Deborah Natera, Debbie was the promotions director, and she goes, well, Syeda, here's his bio. I'm like, who needs a bio on David Cassidy? Everybody knows David Cassidy. I'm excited. Yeah. And so we're looking, and it's like, cool, David Cassidy. But after he put me on the spot on the radio, and he said, hey, Syeda, you're going to come see me tomorrow? Since, I feel like I sleep with you, because I told him I had a David Cassidy nightgown. And of course, I get very razzled when that kind of talk shows up and everybody's listening to this. And I smiled at Bruce and I go, I'll definitely do my best. And so, sold out. David Cassidy sold out. He probably had thousands of people that went to go see him, which is great. And we had him back on the air. And he was like, hey, you didn't come to my show. And I had laundry. And so I said that I had laundry to do, because I did have laundry to do. It's a job for me as a morning girl to wake up at 3:30, get off the air at 10, do some promotions, cut some commercials. It was a full 8-hour day. I'm not going to just, I want to take that Saturday night to do my laundry. And it was a Friday night interview. And Bruce Vidal is like, oh, geez, why are you saying this on the air? This is a major artist. Like, we are nothing. We're an ant compared to David Cassidy, who at one time was a teen heartthrob in the 70s and 80s, early 80s. Yeah. And he still was something in, 2003, 2002. And I learned from that. And I learned, you know what? Even if I'm doing laundry, I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to say, wow, you're the greatest thing in the world. I'm sorry I had to do laundry on the night you were having a concert, which was sold out. And I'm sure women were going crazy. But again, it's a matter of what's connecting with you. Yeah. Remember, music is personal.
Sure.
I Think I Love You didn't do it for me as much as maybe Break On Through to the Other Side or LA Woman. And so I had to guard myself a little bit and just say, David, I'd love to be there. And I couldn't be there. Not because I had laundry. So you learn. Learn.
Well, there's so many of those. And like I said, there was so many people that he impacted, like you had mentioned. And it's a timeline. And so in the 70s, and, you think about people that saw him. And, even for them, seeing him in Vegas after that.
Absolutely. They paid hundreds of dollars and probably even more when you're right up front.
Yeah.
And so you do. You really have to step back. And then when you say, oh, you think you're better than David Cassidy? No. I had fans, David Cassidy fans, calling me, just giving me like, who do you think you are? You're a 2-bit radio. Oh, my God. I am sorry. It was a laundry night. And you learn.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Just keep that part to yourself.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
Well, he probably would have let you in. Even it was so bad. You could have come to the back.
Absolutely. No, David Cassidy he's a heck of an artist. I mean, he's had global success.
Yeah.
He had everything in his heyday. And plus, when you sell out still, when you're not in your heyday, that shows you that you do have a following.
Yeah.
And so you have to respect every artist for that.
Yeah. And I actually really enjoy seeing that now. And again, back to social media, I think that's been great for some of these acts from the late 80s, even the 70s that are still around, and being able to connect. And now it's more on a personal level because they're away from the stardom. And you see, I think it's Rick Springfield that I always watch, because he has
loved him.
He does a Friday night
a show Rick Springfield
on Facebook,
right?
And I think he pulls names, and so you can Zoom with him. And I've sat and watched it, and these ladies are just so pumped.
These ladies are. I'm one of those ladies. Oh my God, Jesse's girl success hasn't spoiled me yet. There's a little bit of goofiness in me with that little pop thing, because he wasn't really hard rock. He wasn't even really rock, but he was very good.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because he's now, like I said, through Instagram,
he can keep himself connected.
Yeah, he can keep himself and people can connect to him.
You have to reinvent yourself, and I think Madonna is one of the best for that. Paul McCartney is one of the best for that. Bob Dylan, who is one of my favorite artists of all times, is great with that.
Yeah,
and I'm going to follow him whether he puts out a bad album or a good album. Yeah. There is no bad album with Dylan. Anyways.
No. Well, I mean, but he's one of those artists that he is really about the message too. About the message. His substance. He has something to say, and he understands that he has a platform to say it, and he's going to say it through his music. And that message is what he's trying to get across. If you happen to enjoy the music that goes with it, great. But if you hear the message, I'm a little bit more proud of that.
Right.
And that's, I think, what's made him kind of transcend, especially when he started. Yeah. Coming from that time of the 60s and where everything was about a message and everything was about trying to...
Well, change.
Right.
And he wanted to change the social climate of the world, and we're still at that place now.
Right.
In 2020 as we were in the early 60s.
Yeah.
When he was talking about Hurricane Carter, we're talking about Patterson, Mr. Patterson. There's so much that's just kind of coming back to us now, that we really are in a dangerous place. And I don't mean that physically. I mean that, well, maybe physically. I mean that in so many different levels. We all need to learn how to heal, communicate, understand, get proper training in certain segments of our jobs in our field, and understand the human psyche better, because we're doing a horrible job of it.
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you said that. And I actually feel like I can open this kind of conversation up to you, because it's not a right or wrong thing. It's just, we're looking at it through music. And I was in the pool the other day, and one of the things I have on my playlist is George Harrison.
Oh yeah.
And I'm listening to that song,
My Sweet Lord.
Exactly. And I'm listening to the words, and I'm kind of just listening, and I'm like, it's just such a soothing song. But if this were to come out today, mm-hmm. how much bashing and how much would he take for that? And if you just kind of take away the negativity part of it and just listen to the music and just kind of go with it, it makes a lot of sense on a lot of different levels. But I'm thinking something like this would never fly today, because things are so sensitive, and we're kind of in such a volatile point where you almost have to agree with everyone or don't put everything out.
Yeah, we're polarized, but again, you can't say, well, whose fault is that? It's a lot of people's fault. And not to get into too much of a political sphere, because I'm not a politician,
right?
In the sense of civic responsibilities, but I do know that we need fit men for the times, fit women for the times, that really have to understand that what's coming out of their mouth and what's in their heart and it's in their brain needs to be synchronized. Because when you deliver the wrong message and the wrong people get it, it's not going to be good. And we just have a lot of lack of, I think, lack of understanding at many different levels. I think sometimes the message that's coming down from the nation is more polarizing than it is uniting. So when you call it the United States, you have to be very careful. And it's not one segment or the other. It's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about civility. It's about being understanding. It's something we've never seen before. And there's no right and wrong in this. There isn't. There is a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions, and it's not going to get better until this. I don't think this pandemic has helped the situation. But I'm a eternal optimist. I think that we will bounce back. I think that we have a couple more months to go before that. But we do need to start healing as a nation and really caring, because what we don't understand is this is contributing to the miseducation of children.
Well, a couple things I can tell you. I appreciate the thoughtfulness in all of your comments, and that's why I said I feel like I can do that, because you're an intelligent person.
Thank you.
And I know that you have responsible words, and you really think about what you put out there. And it was interesting because Coach Mike and I were talking about this as coaches, and I said,
now he's the one from Chafee.
Yeah, okay. You met him right now. I said, one of the things that I learned very young, when you start getting students that come back or players that come back and they start referencing things that you said, you start remembering how the words that come out of your mouth are always interpreted differently by kids. And I said, when you have these high school guys that are now men and have kids of their own or coaching teams of their own, and they come back and they say, hey, you remember that time we were losing and you said this, this, and this, and you're like, no, but if it fired you up, exactly. I wish I would have, someone had, so
motivated you, that it made me happier.
And I'm happy to know that. And I said, I really wish I had videotaped it or recorded it or something, because I could have bottled it and passed it out again. But I don't think a lot of people are in environments sometimes where they have to really be conscious of what they say or really put thought into what comes out of their mouth. And I think that's very important in a lot of jobs, which I wish it was important in every job. And I think that would make a difference. But it's just, the only reason I asked that was because of the music connection, and so much.
Right, and I have listeners who are from so many different facets of, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, whether they're Libertarians, they're the Tea Party, they have no party, they're anarchists, I don't know. Those things are not into my playlist. It's about harmony. If you want to come to KCAL, I'm going to give you a party, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be an escape out of the polarized mindset that's out there. People listen to music for all sorts of reasons. I used to listen to music because my mom would say, it's dinner time. I don't want to eat. Then go to your room. Well, if I'm going to be in my room, I'm going to listen to music. I'm going to tune everybody out.
Sure.
And that's what I want people to do, is when they listen to KCAL, enjoy the music just for a little while. And I think that goes back to my hippie, my 70s, why I like the music. If you really listen to some of the music in the 70s, it's about love. It's about caring. It's about kindness. You know, some of the most beautiful romantic songs are coming out of the rock era. Led Zeppelin's Thank You, A Whole Lot of Love. You know, some of the most beautiful songs came out of Paul McCartney and the Wings. And you listen to those songs and you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. And they're still doing it, different ways, of course, you know, but there's aggressive rock. There's rock that has a lot of meaning. I just think that when I'm playing my music, I'm playing to the listeners. And if they're not listening to it, I don't have a reason to be there. I don't want to push my issues, my burdens, my philosophies, my, you know, lack of education on social events or media, you know, perspectives on them. That's not what they're there for. They listen to music, and that's what I'm going to give them. Now, if they want to like have a moment to talk to me about something, I'll listen to them, but it's going to be with civility. It's going to be with kindness. And if I disagree with them 100%, I can do that.
Sure.
But I'm going to do it without being disrespectful, without, you know, being adversarial. That's really not my personality. It's not what I want to be, and it's not what you know, that's not what music is about.
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of beauty in music, and it depends on where you go, what you take out of it.
Yeah.
You know, music can make you do strange things too, but we won't get into that. But you know, for the most part, it's I have a lot of hope, and I think I have been very, very fortunate for a very, very long time to listen to music, to play some great music, to be around some great musicians. I guide that because I know that, you know, it's kind of tacky. I think it's kind of cheesy to name drop, but at the same time, it's fun to know some of these people. It's like, wow, I got to meet so and so. Wow, I got to know them. So it is a trip. And you know, interviewing Jeff Tate from Queensryche, that was one of my loved Queensryche. You know, I loved Silent Lucidity. Maybe not a whole bunch of songs after that, but to me, they were a great band. You know, Twisted Sister, when we interviewed them. You have no idea what an intelligent person Dee Snider is. Yeah. He's one of the most intelligent business people ever. He doesn't drink. He lives a clean living. You know, he puts on a bunch of crazy makeup and rocks people out, but he knows how to live after that. And so it's not as self-destructive as people assume it is. They may look at them and say, oh my God, who are these people? But their music is good, they're fun, they're cool, and then they go back to being normal. Then you interview some people where you know there is something going on in this person's head. They're not going to be able to answer this question, but you continue, you know, and you talk to them, and you know, you're doing it as a job. I don't just interview people for the heck of interviewing people. It's high profile. It's in my hand. This is my job. This is my task. Let me do the best I can. And I genuinely think most artists are good people. You know, even the ones that I know that might have been on substance when I was talking to them or something was wrong with them, we try to get through the interview. But I forgive them very easily because I really do believe in the kindness and the goodness of people.
Sure. No, and I appreciate that. That's actually one of the cool things about your job. We call it a job, but I mean, it's fun, and but you enjoy it. I mean, you genuinely enjoy people. So sticking along those lines, sticking in we'll say rock, but being that you're kind of a well-rounded person and you enjoy interviewing people, not in an interview, if you could pick 3 people and I were to put you in that lobby anytime, doesn't even have to be.
For what reason?
Just to have a chat, you know, just to have a chat, you know.
I mean, if I get to dream, can't I dream big?
You can. That's exactly. I mean, it could be historical. It could be music. It could be education, business. 3 people to sit in that lobby with you, and you were just sitting there waiting, and you just had a chat. 3 people that you would like to sit and chat with.
In today's day and age.
Past or present. They can be
past or present.
It's a big range.
I would. Well, number one, it would be Bob Dylan.
Okay.
Because I feel as if he's. I mean, the whole cliche of voice of a generation and everything else, and getting the Nobel laureate. I mean, he's come full circle, and he's lasted about 5 decades. Yeah. And that's longevity. Yeah. And he whatever Dylan did on his terms. Even when he wasn't doing it on his terms, he was doing it on his terms. So I think he would be a very fascinating person to interview.
Okay.
My second person would be Tom Morello, and maybe Rage.
Okay.
I think he's, well, not Rage now, but he's just a very conscientious, educated, civic-minded musician who's actually really good as a rock and roller. So he would be my second choice. And my third choice would, it's so hard because there's so many.
That's why I gave you
such an open the third person would be Rosa Parks.
Okay.
Because she didn't know she was making history. And then when you do make history, what's next?
Yeah.
And to change an entire nation and to be one of the iconic leaders of the civil rights movement without really going and pushing yourself out there was it was not only a challenge, she championed it, she outlived that burden, because it is sometimes, you're not famous at that time for doing what you're doing.
Sure.
But it would definitely be her.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, it's just, because of your experience and because you've met some different celebrities, I'm always curious to see what that would be. And I was waiting for someone like Rosa Parks because I thought you're a little bit deeper than just the music. And it is, like I said.
Hey, Tom Morello and Dylan are deep. But I think Rosa Parks, it would have been wonderful because I would have had to say, like, we never lived that life.
Right.
We never lived that era.
Right.
For what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Look at how upset people are getting right now. Can you imagine a time when you had no choice?
Yeah.
When you're working that long hour and you're just tired.
Yeah.
And a woman who just got tired didn't realize that her strength just started a movement that changed the course of history for the United States of America.
Yeah.
I just wanted to maybe sit down and talk to her after I would thank her.
Sure.
And I don't think she even knew she was doing it. But then she's like, oh, no stopping now. Let's just get this show on the road.
Yeah.
And good for her. So I think I wish it would have been obviously there's more. I would have loved to have met Muhammad Ali, sports-wise. I think Rosa Parks is a civil rights icon to me. But yeah, she would be it's so hard to put three in.
Yeah.
But
no, and like I said, three because you could go on about different people.
Absolutely,
but,
it's always threes.
Three's easy, but I always do that.
What was
question.
yours? What's your three?
Mine, honestly,
Sorry.
No, you're okay. Muhammad Ali was one of them.
Look at that!
Yeah, that was a ding ding ding.
Yeah.
And I'm stuck between John Lennon and Jim Morrison. Just because, I would too, but I kind of feel like
Morrison. I tell him don't go to Paris, and make sure you stay off of drugs. Don't take anything you don't know. He was just a frustrated artist.
Yeah, but the thing about him to me is that I always just would find it fascinating to just let him talk and see where his mind would go.
You can go on Google, and there's a couple good. One is Torres, who works for the Rolling Stones magazine.
Okay.
And it was, I believe, in 70. Another one was in 69 or 70, and it was by Howard Smith, another reporter back then. And great 1 hour interviews. And he's sober, so that's even better, because I believe that when he was inebriated and had too much alcohol in him, the devil would come out of Morrison. And I think many people have claimed that. I was nowhere near that time. But I just think that with Morrison, I don't know if you were aware, but in Florida, the governor finally pardoned him for something he never even did.
Right.
And I thought, wow, that's nice. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? In the nation, we're pardoning people for things they have done.
Right.
But you're going to pardon him for something he didn't do? That's kind of cool.
Right.
But he was a mystic person ahead of his time. He was a frustrated writer who wanted to be taken seriously. He created a persona that he couldn't get out of.
Right.
And through alcohol and through some family issues, there was no way out for him.
Yeah. Well,
he felt.
And honestly, that's part of the reason. You see people like that. And as a human being, I not that I as a psychologist in any way, but
you don't have to be.
You just want to know, where did that take you? What did you think was going to end up with all of this that you were doing? Or, just on a level of what he was thinking, trying to get into that creative mind that he had. Because for everybody looking, everyone's going to see a different point of view. some people saw a crazy in his antics and that's all they saw. Other people go through and they read the music and you can kind of understand what he's trying.
Well, I'm sure that in the interviews that you're going to see, which is the real Morrison, because he's sitting there talking to people, so it's his voice, it's his words, it's his emotions, that he was a very stable person at that time when he's interviewing. That's one facet, that's one side of him. And then you see the beer coming in and it's probably getting more aggressive. And that's why, I choose not to be involved in that stuff. But I don't think he had limits. He didn't have boundaries of what he could. But he was very, very, I mean, when it comes to, I think he had a genius IQ of 149. Yeah. And he was a graduate of UCLA in film. And I think he wanted to do so much. But that it was the wrong time for him. Yeah. It was like so much restraint. And, there was an interview with Howard Smith and Torres who both called him fat. I mean, if you were sitting here and you told me I was fat, I would probably start crying. But they were that's a horrendous thing to say to somebody. Hey, Jim, you're getting fat. Why would you do that to somebody? You don't do that to anybody anyways. Why would you do that to him? Yeah. Because he was Jim Morrison. I think that persona, he couldn't live up to it. He didn't want to create it and probably wanted to get the heck out of Dodge after LA Woman. Yeah. But anyways, I can go on a Morrison kick, but I don't think I'd want to interview him. I don't know what that would end up like.
And I guess maybe interview is not the word. I mean, it's just like I said, we're four people sitting in a room. And part of it is the combination. I would want to hear what Muhammad Ali had to say to Jim Morrison, because they were kind of contemporaries and two different sides, for lack of a better term.
I know Morrison and Dylan got along. Yeah. And I know he liked some other stuff, like with the Beatles and with the Stones, but I don't know if he ever came paths with Jim Morrison. Yeah. Probably because Ali didn't drink. I don't know.
Yeah. But, I also look at the dynamics of that four, not necessarily an interview. Just kind of, I want to be involved in that conversation and hear where this goes.
So you had Morrison, you had Muhammad Ali, and I actually would probably have to throw Mickey Mantle in there. I have to put a baseball guy. That's right, sports guy.
And I have to. And like I said, he was one that he was before my time, so I only saw him in video. And that goes along with like the musicians. I always want, I tell people I probably should have been born when my dad was born, because I'm fascinated with the 60s.
You have an old spirit.
I think so. And now I'm just old. But
That's not true. That's not true. Age is a number.
I like seeing those old videos of the 60s and the early 70s and how simple everybody seemed to be. For me, it just looked like they appreciated everything because they didn't know what they didn't have. Now, like I said, we have so much access to things and, they're so much more mature. You don't just see the pure joy in going to a baseball game or watching it. And, when the way his life ended, and I still watch a lot of those, he didn't understand.
Mickey Mantle?
Mickey Mantle.
I know nothing about him, so keep talking. I want to know.
Well, eventually it was liver that killed him because.
Oh, so he was a drinker.
He was a drinker. Here's one.
Now, see, that's what you want in a room: Jim Morrison and Mickey Mantle.
And no alcohol, because I want to understand him. And then I don't want Ali getting mad and starting to whack people. So it's just listening to all of that. But with Mickey Mantle, he was also in that time of the '60s where Dean Martin, and he would hang out in New York with all of these guys, and those athletes in the 60s were always hanging around with those Rat Pack guys. And
right.
So you've got that genre there.
Well, I think celebrities like to hang out with other celebrities.
Right.
They have fans too.
Sure. Well, and it's usually when you see them talking to each other, you see these on shows where they're talking about athletes want to be actors and actors want to be athletes. And, I like your fame. I like my fame, but I like your fame better. And I don't have to get hurt to have your fame.
Right.
And so, thinking about that era and the way that those guys conducted themselves, in no way do I condone it. But at the time, he would make comments in interviews that, had I known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. And at the end, when he's an old man and he's already had the liver transplant. And
how old was Mantle when he died?
I want to say he was maybe just past 70. I'm not 100% sure.
Back then, that was a good life.
Yeah. And so he had talked about how he had spent his last days kind of being an advocate for, hey, I'm not a role model like people think because of baseball. I want to be a role model now, telling you sitting here in my position, don't do things the way that I did. So here's a man humble at his most vulnerable hour, still trying to in his mind, recuperate some of his life, what he thought other people thought of him. So he always had that kind of a insecurity about how people saw him. And if you look at his career numbers from a baseball standpoint, he was hurt, and the drinking and the partying and all that. He had a phenomenal career, and he's still a baseball legend. But it was very
self-destructive.
Yes, and to him, he never lived up to what he should have been, never lived up to what his father thought he should have been.
Right.
And he's remorseful at the very end. So he's that kind of typical tragic figure where everyone else would love to have the career that he had, but to him it wasn't enough, and he realized because of the way he treated himself. And so there's a sentimental thing about that where, you know, I guess if I had him in a room, I would want to tell him, hey, from a fan standpoint, you did more than you even think you did. You know, you were probably more of a person than you thought you were. And so I don't think he ever lived long enough to see the impact that had on people, you know, because now you see it. And like you said, back then, smoking and drinking, and there's pictures that pop up on the internet of players in the dugout smoking and the big chews of tobacco, and guys in the locker room drinking. And, you know, so sports was different, obviously, as
there's
everything.
That old saying, hell is true, seen too late.
Yeah.
So when you know, it's like, now I'm here.
Yeah.
I wish I could have, I should have, I could have.
Yeah.
But you don't. And that's why William Blake is attributed to no one here gets out alive. The road to excess leads to the palace of wisdom.
Yeah.
Because you have nowhere else to go when you've done so much drugs and so much. You've just put so much abuse in your system, whether it's overeating, just tons of alcohol, and I don't mean to belabor this with Morrison, but I think sometimes artists who are very disturbed, who are very like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, you have Jim Morrison, you have Amy Winehouse, you have the ones who have committed suicide lately, and you have the wonderful artists, good people have delivered so much goodness in this world, but took something back and didn't take care of themselves. Yeah. Tragic, very tragic.
And just the whole not seeing the good that you have, seeing yourself in that negative light all the time is very saddening to me, but when people do that, and I
feel like we're in a depressive state right now. We're not talking about sad things. I'm like, wait a minute, where's this interview going?
It wasn't meant to go that way. It's just, I get, we're talking about.
I'm sad you're dead, Jim, but you're gone.
I am too, because you're more and you always think about that too. Where would he be at this point right now? What would he think about?
Well, he's in Paris, I think. We think, right?
And how old would he be right now?
He would be about 78, 79 years old. Wow. Yeah. Morrison was born in 42.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. In December, I believe.
Huh.
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Why do I know this? I know way too much.
I would have thought he was older. And, and then you see those pictures of Elvis Presley if he had lived now, or he would, so it's always interesting to think about those. But no, I mean, if you want to have a conversation with different people, there's a reason, and that's why.
So that would be it. Those would be my three.
Those would be your three. Those are my three. And on different days, honestly, Jimi Hendrix has popped in there sometimes, and I think about moments that they lived through, and I just want to ask them, what's it like? There was I don't know if you saw it, but my wife was watching a documentary on Garth Brooks that was on Netflix, and it was a 2-part, and there was a point where he's just kind of reminiscing, and he was talking about a show that he did, and I can't remember where it was at. And he's walking through the door, and there was a little concession girl sitting, and he says she's sitting there, and she's kind of scared to talk to me, and she walks by, and she says, "What's it like?" And he says, "Excuse me?" And she goes, "What's it like being in front of all those people?" And he says, "Well, let's find out." And so he takes her on stage with her as they're going up this elevator, and he says, you can hear. And then you start feeling the vibration, and you get to the top, and all of these people are screaming. And this little girl, I can feel her just trembling, and she's crying. And he says, I introduce her, and I ask everybody in the stadium to cheer for her as if she was me. And they're going up, and he says, and the crowd's going crazy, and they're yelling her name, and they're putting her name on the board. And he says, and then the sad part is you have to tell them all goodbye. And he says, in tears, she says, I don't want to do it. And he goes, well, that's what it's like.
That's what it's like.
Yeah. And I said, how cool would it be for that one person to know? Because, we've never experienced being Jim Morrison and going or being.
Thank God for that, though. Well, the music is great. The lifestyle I don't want to experience. Thank you very much, Ernie.
I meant the celebrity or the things that
But on Rocklahoma, with some of our DJs, we did get to go. I think it was in 2008. We brought some Jackal. We brought some rockers on stage. Okay. And it was a outdoor rock fest called Rocklahoma. Okay. And it was in, of course, Pryor, Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So it's cool. And you got to meet some interesting people. I mean, Twisted Sister was there, L.A. Guns was there, Bret Michaels was there. Wow. At that point, he was shooting his Rock of Love for VH1. Chips Enough from Enough's Enough. Mm-hmm. Steven Adler was there from Guns N' Roses. So good people, very familiar with KCAL, and it was good to talk to them. But again, it's not my lifestyle. Right. It's just me talking to them, hanging. We can hang out, but it just doesn't get any further than that, which could be a really good thing because you want to enjoy the music. Sure. And I think maybe that's where I might be a little different because I really don't like the partying and the lifestyle of rock and roll. I like the music of rock and roll, and I'm very interested in maybe their lifestyle, how they made it, what does this song mean. I'm just like everyone else. Sure. Sometimes I'm in the car, I'm listening to some, I'll listen to KCAL and listen to what someone's saying and talking about whatever jock and who they're talking about. If they're talking about a certain album, a certain music. I learned so much from Daryl. It's very informative about the music he plays. And so, yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if you can answer this or not, but when you're not working at KCAL, what else do you listen to?
Of course, I can answer it. I like a lot of Pakistani music. Okay. So, for instance, I'm from Pakistan. I guess it's Pakistan. I really enjoy listening to Nusrat Fateh Ali. He passed away a while back. He did an album with Pearl Jam, actually with Eddie Vedder, for Dead Man Walking. He did the CD for that. And I love listening. I like some of the Bollywood music. Okay. My husband likes to listen to different kind of genres, so I let him be the DJ at home. And he's a pretty good DJ, believe it or not. And so I have a, eclectic taste in music. I like to listen to different artists. I'm not a big fan of today's country, but I like some of the classic countries. And I do. I'm probably not that good with easy listening. It just kind of puts me to sleep. I know it's a horrible thing to say. I'm not too much into the pop. If my niece is in the car and my nephew are in the car, Shireen and Cheyenne, and they will tell me what to listen to. They're like, can you please put it on Ariana Grande or Billie Eilish? Or, they like their music. Sure. And I'll tolerate it. Yeah. And I'll put it on there. And I think they're great artists. But, everything is a preference. Sure. And my preference is rock. And if it's rock, it's there. And then even with the rock, I have preferences in, more 70s, more 90s, more 2000. And I think that's just a preference. It doesn't mean it's better or worse. Yeah. I know some people who think Dylan can't sing. Well, Dylan's a preacher. Yeah. And so I'll start defending him. And so I'm like, what do you mean Dylan can't sing? So, we go back and forth. But yeah, and I actually genuinely do enjoy listening to KCAL. I think that's the one good thing I can say. If I was working at another station when I was at KFWB, interning at KFWB at that time, I listened to news all the time. But I would listen to that station. So right.
That's interesting. Just a curious question.
Yeah, absolutely.
You spin the dial when you get in the car.
Absolutely.
And again, like we talked about, it's times too. Sometimes you're in different moods, different frames of mind. Absolutely. I know lately, just with everything that's been going on, I've been trying to focus more on light music. Kind of uppity, summery kind of happy music. Trying not to get too deep, just
that's
to kind of keep mentally on the positive side. But
you probably don't want to put on Dark Side of the Moon then.
Nothing like that that's going to go that direction. But I mean, it's just curious. And music is something that connects everybody. When I have friends and they're like, oh, that guy can't sing. Well, guess what? You're listening to him. He ain't listening to you. So you can criticize all you want. That's as far as it goes. But, again, it was just great to have you in.
Thank you.
And now I'm looking forward to the KCAL version of the show.
Yes, part 2. We're going to do this. It'll be fun. Yeah, I'd love to come back in.
We'll connect.
How do you need me to come in? You need to come in not just with a T-shirt on. I need to have my rocker shirt on, black nail polish. How would you like this to be done?
There you go. DJ, we're going right from the station to a concert. We're going to, listen to Metallica.
There you go.
Pick 4 bands that you're going to listen to and then put it on like that. And then we'll come here and we'll talk about some of your interviews. We'll talk about some of the positive and funny things that have happened at KCAL, because there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear more about just what it's like to be a DJ. Like I said, for me, growing up in that time, that was curious. Because I'll honestly
totally tell you from my farm days in Porterville, California, where I got my start, and I actually lived in Pixley, because there is a town called Pixley, California. It's not just on Green Acres, so I'll give you all that.
So when you left, did they go out and change the sign?
I was very famous for my hog reports in the Coachella Valley. Yes, I was. I mean, not the Coachella Valley. I'm sorry, the San Joaquin Valley. It was a very interesting time for me, but it was early 1990s.
And you know what? I want to hear about those interviews.
You got it. You got it.
Well, folks, she is and always will be Miss Syeda Jafri. And next time we will get into a little bit more, and we will have the KCAL DJ coming in to represent her when she comes in on part 2. But again, thanks for listening. Again, I want to thank my sponsors, Chihuahua Cerveza, 100% Media, and Adam Schwartz Real Estate. And till next Friday, we'll see you.